Sensenbrenner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Historically, climate treaties such as the UNFCCC and Kyoto have been submitted to the Senate as treaties. A Senate report prior to Kyoto stated that, in the view of the Foreign Relations Committee, any amendment to the convention that adopted emissions target would have to be submitted to the Senate. Will the administration treat a Copenhagen climate deal, if one is reached, as an Article 2 treaty requiring advice and consent by 2/3 of the Senate, or will the administration say that this is a congressional executive agreement that would simply need a majority vote in both houses?
Mr. Sensenbrenner, it's certainly our expectation that that an agreement would be submitted to the Senate. I mean, we don't have any other plan at this point.
That's good to hear. Now, the conundrum, of course, is that developing countries, and led by China and India, have adamantly objected to any type of legally binding emissions cap in a treaty. And when you talked in June to the Climate Action Symposium, you started looking at the math of the increasing growth of emissions in China and India, coupled with the targets that are being proposed for the developed world, and you called this the unforgiving math of accumulating emissions. Your words, not mine. In light of this unforgiving math, would you agree to a treaty that did not include binding commitments from developing countries, particularly China and India?
We have, Mr. Chairman, we have in our submission we've called for binding commitments by all the major players, and that's what we're seeking. I mean, it is in our view understandable and appropriate, really, that there be differences as between what the developed countries are doing and what developing countries are doing with respect to the actual content of actions. And I think those are differences that ought to disappear over time. But we still recognize that there's some basis for difference.
Well, the Bali Agreement, which was negotiated by the Bush administration, did talk about differentiated commitments. I guess my question is that if China and India stonewall on the issue of binding commitments, is that a deal breaker that you and the administration would be willing to walk away from?
No, that's what I was just getting to that, Mr. Sensenbrenner. What I was about to say is that I don't think that I see a basis for some difference in content. I don't see a basis for saying we have to stand behind what we're talking about and they don't have to stand behind what they're talking about. So we do think that it is that's quite important, and as I say, it's in our submission.
Well, I can say that looking at it from afar and relying on press reports, the response of the Environment Minister of India following Secretary Clinton's visit to New Delhi and the press conference that she had there certainly was not encouraging that India would sign up for binding commitments. So I wish you good luck in hopefully getting them to realize that they've got to jump on board binding commitments if they expect the rest of the world to do that. The final piece of questions that I'd like to ask you, Mr. Stern, is, as I mentioned in my opening statement, developing countries are trying to weaken intellectual property rights. And I'm very concerned that the developing countries have proposed preventing patenting and developing in their countries, requiring compulsory licensing, ensuring access to new technologies on a non-exclusive royalty-free term. Does the administration support any of these positions, or will the administration work to make sure that the protection of intellectual property rights, which in my opinion is needed to assemble the capital to develop these new technologies, be included in a treaty that comes out of Copenhagen?
We don't support those positions, Mr. Sensenbrenner. Look, I think that intellectual property is central to our system, and indeed, if you look at this problem, which is the way I look at it, I think the way we look at it, is fundamentally an issue that is only going to be solved with the development through innovation, with the development of new technologies, promoted through the right rules of the road, to be sure. You can't have a problem based on whose solution is based on innovation if you interfere with intellectual property rights. Now, having said that, we also have to recognize it is terribly important that we do find ways completely consistent with intellectual property protection where we seek to diffuse and disseminate technology to places that need it. But we don't have any. I don't think I have any difference of opinion with what you've stated.
That's good to hear. I yield back the balance of my time. Quit while we're ahead.